Hey guys, it's Ben here with the Half Court Heave podcast. I'm here. Isaac makes his dramatic return. I think he's last been on like a month. But anyways, we're back here finally uploading consistently again in the new year. I hope you guys are staying safe, having a good new year, staying safe from COVID and everything else happening in the world. But without further ado, just before we get into the action, I do want to talk about our merch. Our merchandise is on, it's not on sale anymore, but it is still very, very cheap and very, very comfortable. You can ask anybody who's bought it. Everybody gives me a great review about how good the merch is and how comfortable it is, or if you're getting like a bag or a pillow, everything's great. But also, if you're watching right now and you're not subscribed, you should go ahead and subscribe. And if you haven't liked, you should like, because both of those things are vitals. We bring you guys great content every time we post, and we bring it consistently. But let's just go ahead and let's get into the first thing we do want to talk about today, which is Jaylen Brown the best player on the Celtics? Now, Arjun, you're wearing a Celtics jersey, so this question will go to you first.
Okay, I will say that Jaylen Brown, he is having one hell of a season, and Tatum is also playing very well this season. But I'm going to rephrase, who would I rather have on my team? Brown is at an efficiency peak. I mean, this guy, I think he's not more skilled than Tatum, but he's better. Because what he's doing right now, he's always been so skilled. He's always been such a he's a better overall defender. May not be as skilled of a scorer, but he's a lot more efficient, and he has that true shooting percentage shows that, and that percentage and that efficiency rating.
No. Okay. Jaylen Brown, he's one hell of a player, and he's really underrated in the league. And I think that needs to be talked about more, about how good of a player he is. I think he's probably top 30, 35. He's up there. But if you're saying he's better than Jason Tatum, then you're crazy. He's not better than Jason Tatum. I would not rather have him than Jason Tatum. He's 2 years older than Jason Tatum. He's consistently not as good as Jason Tatum is. We've talked about how Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic, and Giannis are going to be running the league in 5 years. Saying that you think that that Jaylen Brown is better, or you would rather have him on your team, I could get saying through 7 games Jaylen Brown has been better, because that's a fact. He's played better throughout the games that they've played so far, but it's a very small sample size. Jaylen Brown's not better than Jason Tatum. I thought you, who watches Celtics games yourself, would know that, Arjun.
Okay, I said go ahead, get your take in.
Yeah, so I think this year you're looking at Kemba's injured right now. Last year, you also think for a lot of Celtics fans, Kemba took a step back from where you want him to be as a leader and the best player. He's not in the conversation for the best player right now. He's not present. He hasn't played one game this year. He wasn't the best player last year either. I think Jaylen Brown is the Celtics' best player right now, especially in this new year. Let me talk about why. Marcus Smart is probably the Celtics' best defender. Everyone recognizes that. Their second best defender is undoubtedly Jaylen Brown. He's a leader on defense and offense. He's almost averaging 2 steals right now. He's averaging 5 rebounds, 3.3 assists, and 26.2 points on 41% three-point shooting, 55% field goal percentage. That is incredible stats right now.
That's way too low of a sample size.
Stats aside, I think I would rather have Jaylen Brown long-term in the Celtics. He is someone who can lead the team for many years to come. Okay? And
the thing is that both of them, I think Tatum has a brighter future, actually.
You guys watch Celtics?
But right now, Jaylen Brown is at an efficiency peak. I mean, he's playing. You can't ignore the fact that, like Isaac said, 41% from three-point land. That is absolutely insane. I mean, I know it's a small sample size, but we've seen Jaylen Brown be extremely efficient before. You shouldn't be surprised. I would say that I would not be surprised at all if he continues shooting above 50% and still scoring plus 25 per game, because these guys have better shot selection than Tatum. Although Tatum can make those shots, he's more skilled of a scorer. He takes some stupid shots sometimes. I mean, in the clutch, he has annoyed me sometimes, because against the Heat and the Raptors, he took step back deep threes instead of actually driving and taking a smart shot. It's just overall IQ, efficiency, defense. I mean, this guy really has the whole entire package.
Yeah.
No, okay. No, you
Also,
talk about efficiency. You guys
quickly.
bring up efficiency so much, and it's so funny because Tatum shot better from three than Jaylen Brown did last season. And I'm not taking anything away from Jaylen Brown. He's one hell of a player, and he's very efficient. But Jason Tatum is just as efficient as he is. And I guess you could talk about how Jason Tatum, he might score more, he might do all this more than Brown has in the past, and maybe it's changing now. But the reason Jason Tatum has had a higher usage is because the organization and the coach, Brad Stevens, know he's better than Jaylen Brown. They run the plays through Jason Tatum. There's a reason Jaylen Brown is not the one getting the calls for these game winners. It's because they know. The head coach, Brad Stevens of the Boston Celtics, knows Jason Tatum is the guy because he's 2 years younger and he's already better than Jaylen Brown. Again, not taking anything away from him, but he's not better.
But going back to efficient.
Just to step aside from this for a second, I think Jaylen Brown's the better player. I think he's undoubtedly the better leader on and off the court. But I want to talk about Kemba really quickly. It might be a little off topic, but he is what people foresaw a couple of years ago to be their lead player. They were talking about building around him, having those two guys work their offense and defense around him. Right now, he does not look like the best player. He might even be the third best player on the team.
He's undoubtedly the third best player on that team.
Celtics are going to have to decide, aside from who we think is the best player on the team, they're going to have to decide how they're running this team, because we saw the same problem with Kyrie Irving, trying to incorporate him back into the team after those guys have played. Now, they have more experience in the league now, but we're going to have to see how is this team going to work together, because last year it didn't work as well as any Boston fan would have liked in the way that Kemba Walker worked with those two guys, because I believe Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum probably both think they're the best player on the team. They deserve that center spot, and they have to get that figured out, especially when Kemba Walker is no longer injured and comes back. That's really important.
Yeah, and I think
Ben, quickly going back to the playoffs, I think that when you talked about overall efficiency, it's not just the numbers, but it's also the fact that in the playoffs, you would often see Tatum having a really good performance or an absolutely terrible performance. I mean, I'm like referring to that 3 for like 20 performance. I mean, he has those on and off games. Jaylen Brown always gives you those good production. He never really has a game where he shoots below 40%. Really, I don't remember the last time he's done that. He always has that good field goal percentage, and yeah.
No, yeah, like he's probably more consistent as now, but that also comes with age, and that also comes with more experience playing basketball. Jason Tatum, I don't have to tell Celtics fans his age because they seem to have it memorized in the books at all times, but he's 21 years old. Jaylen Brown is 23. This guy already is undoubtedly better than Jaylen Brown. You could question the leadership, but also, like, are either of those two guys really the leader on the team? No, they're super young. I mean, they're two of the youngest guys besides, of course, like Naismith, Pritchard, all those young rookies they have that they don't play, but they're not the leaders. And when you look at purely the best player, and especially who you would rather have on your team, Arjun, if you're taking Jaylen Brown, then you're radical, and I don't get why you would take that at all. But the next thing I do want to talk about, I hope we can have a consensus on. We've actually had a consensus on this team a lot in the past, but let's talk about the New York Knicks. And do the Knicks have a legitimate shot at the playoffs or the play-in tournament this year? Isaac.
I think right now they're going to fizzle out. They've showed a little signs of hope, maybe for Knicks fans in terms of being a playoff team. They will not get to the playoffs. I think Washington in the East, Washington's going to get better. They're going to overtake them. The Knicks will start to play like the Knicks again later on. I think they have a shot at the play-in. Maybe, that's the top 10 seeds, but there's no way they're going to the now. They don't really have a cohesive team. They're just kind of in between. They've had some luck, or some RJ Barrett has had some great games so far at the beginning of the season, but there's no way they're going to the playoffs. Other teams in the East are going to do better, and they're just going to play worse.
Yeah, no.
I'll go after this one, but I don't think they're a playoff lock in terms of that. But I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that one, because I think they do have a good chance of competing for the play-in, because with the level that they're playing on, they've played against good competition. You can remember Thibs' argument that he's going to wear out all their players, which isn't an invalid argument. But then again, Alec Burks had 20 points per game in those 3 games that he played, and he's coming back soon. That's going to give them additional depth. I mean, Barrett's playing like a number 3 pick. Besides that last game, he was averaging 18, 7, and 4. Emmanuel Quickly is filling the point guard hole. I mean, he is, even though he was a 25, the number 25 pick. I think that nobody really expected him to play well. He's actually playing. He's giving you solid production. He's putting up like 57% field goal percentage, and then he's also just giving them solid production. So if you look at the way they're playing, and Julius Randle, that man is playing out of his mind. I think they can compete for the play-in.
No, that's ridiculous. That's completely ridiculous. Because, like, of course, there's the chance they can make the play-in. There's a chance they make the playoffs. And, of course, it's always there. Literally any team can make the playoffs. You can never bet against any team. The Pistons right now can go on a 15-game win streak and be the best team in the East. But we all know that's not going to happen. We look at the Knicks, and we look at their head coach, Tom Thibodeau. Of course, they're playing better right now. The stats are inflated. You have to look at, is this team sustainable? And they're absolutely not sustainable. For them to make the playoffs, you're going to look at Julius Randle and say that guy has to play all NBA basketball for an entire 72-game season. He has to play MVP, all-star level basketball, starting all-star basketball for an entire season. Alec Burks has to average 20 points per game. They beat the Jazz. They came back on the Jazz. Austin Rivers had, 24 points? Is that sustainable? When you look at the minutes that they play, Tom Thibodeau, he's done this every year. There's a reason that his super talented teams in the past have underperformed when he had Cat, Jimmy Butler, and Andrew Wiggins. They had Jimmy Butler at the start of the season. I think it was his second season in Minnesota. He averaged 24 for the first month. He looked amazing. Everyone was saying this guy's going to be an all-star starter. They're going to be a great team in the West. And then as the months went by, his stats got worse and worse. His shooting went worse and worse. He got tired. Julius Randle, especially Julius Randle, and this young team, they're not going to be used until playing 40 minutes per game. And also, not using a bench, super unsustainable for winning in the future when you don't have that talented of a team. So when it comes down to what I bet on them to have a big chance to make the play-in, no, I don't think they will scratch the surfaces. I think they'll be the 12 or the 13 this year, and then possibly lower, but that would come with even more fatigue. But no, absolutely not. This play is not sustainable. They're not going to be near the playoffs. They could maybe, if everything goes perfect, make the play-in, but everything going perfect means Julius Randle, Spin Boy, continues playing all-star, all-NBA basketball, and that's not happening.
Okay, Ben, that's a fair point, but that's just that's so blown over because first of all, you look at the teams competing right now, the Wizards are looking god-awful. I mean, Beal dropped 60, and they still lost. Yeah. I mean, I know it's 76ers, but you drop 60 and you still lose. That's disappointing. You look at the Hornets right now; they have a terrible center. They have terrible coaching. They have a terrible center position because you know what? If you ever have an all-star center playing against them, they're going to feast. They're going to have 40 and 10. I mean, it's so easy to play against Biyombo. And you just look at this team, they do have Obi Toppin coming off the bench. You can give him good minutes if Randle is saying he gets tired over the season. Toppin Toppin, I don't know. I think it's Toppin, but he can give him good production. He's averaging 9 points right now. Alec Burks, you may say that it's not sustainable, but looking at it right now, they are playing very well. And you know what? They have the bench. They have a not a great bench, but they have a bench that can step up if
But that's not the Thibodeau way. Thibodeau doesn't use a bench. He places starters 40 minutes a game. That's why it's unsustainable.
And you don't think he's learned anything from that?
No, he's been passed around the league more than Larsa Pippen. He hasn't learned anything.
I know, but
also, all I gotta say,
done in the past. There's gotta go ahead.
If I'm RJ Barrett right now, you're looking at a total Anthony Davis situation where how long did Anthony Davis spend with the Pelicans? Or maybe he made the playoffs a couple times, but lost in the first round or something like that. That's the situation you're looking at. You're looking at Kemba Walker. I'm not comparing these players together. I'm just talking about in the situation he's in right now. He's a very talented player. He is one of the Knicks' only hopes right now at a decent future. And I want to get out of New York or have them put players around them because this happens every year is that New York is confused about what they're doing. You know, they're going to build old vets. Then they try to get a disgruntled star, build their young players. Then they get a disgruntled star who hates it and stays for a year or leaves in the middle. I mean, they just do not know how to run themselves. They have no path forward. They have
and they have a decent young core. I wouldn't say it's good. I wouldn't say it's great. They have a decent young core. Julius Randle is playing out of his mind, and they're playing successful basketball. But you said, don't you think he's learned his lesson? No, he's playing Julius Randle 44 minutes a game. He's obviously not learned his lesson. If he had learned his lesson, he would be playing actual minutes to his decent bench like Austin Rivers. Alec Burks, Austin Rivers, of course, carried them on their backs, which is another reason that their play is not sustainable if you don't have a closer. The difference between the Wizards, Hornets, and Knicks is the Wizards and the Hornets have a closer. We saw that in the Hornets-Hawks game the other night. We saw that Gordon Hayward, when it came down to it, they almost blew that 24-point lead, but Gordon Hayward went for 5 straight off the bench, and I think he scored like some of the last 20 points for the Hornets and had an amazing fadeaway shot to basically clinch the game. Julius Randle's not the closer that you have every game. He's not like that when it comes to those types of situations. They're relying on Austin Rivers to bring them back. If you're relying on those types of players to bring you back every time you're down to a team, especially this good like the Jazz, you're not going to win games the more the season goes on and the more players start playing more together with their team, especially in this unprecedented of a season. But the next thing I do want to talk about, it goes on to the Rockets, and that is this current Rockets team the best of any team in the current NBA of Harden's best chances to win a title? Like, if he were to be traded anywhere, would he have a better title chance than with this current roster? Personally, I think I'll start this off. I think that this is probably Harden's best chance at his title, and it's not because this team is better than any other team he could be traded to, like Philly or like Denver. I think that he could be I think the only team that could probably be a better chance is Denver, but it goes down to the assets that they would have to give up. If you go and you try to make a trade with Philly, you give up Ben Simmons and Matisse Thybulle and picks, that team's not going to be Philly as we know it. It's going to be James Harden, Joel Embiid, and Tobias Harris. It's not the same team. We don't know how that's going to work, and they'll lose assets in the making. And then you look at other teams that'll probably give up more than just one player. Like you look at the Nuggets. They'll probably have to give up MPJ and Jamal Murray if they wanted to get that deal done. They're not. If they do that, it's a completely different team. It's a worse team that loses their title hopes if they do that trade. This current team won't lose anything having James Harden talent-wise. They have Christian Wood, who's showing signs of Anthony Davis in his blood. You look at John Wall, who seems to not be slowing down at all. You look at Eric Gordon. You look at Daniel House. You have a deep bench, and you have a great starting lineup. You have DeMarcus Cousins, who's been playing great off of his injury. This team, if they can start clicking together and Harden accepts that he's going to be there another year, this is probably his best hopes at a title until he gets to another team in the free agency.
Okay.
Isaac, I'll go ahead and I'll keep this brief. But first of all, there's no way you can say that this team is his best chance.
How?
Because he already had his best chance already. That's gone by. It's blew by. I mean, 2000. You're comparing this team. I get they're a good team. They've got a good mix.
No, it's current teams in the NBA. It's not past teams.
No, but just in general. I mean, if you're looking at the team that Houston has right now, this isn't a championship caliber team. I mean, this isn't like, I don't care if they mix well at all. You look at like Christian Wood, he's good. Is John Wall good? Yeah, he's looking good right now. But besides that, you don't have any outright veteran. You don't have any outright like a mix of veteran leadership. You have a mix of young people, but you just have such a team that I don't see meshing well together. I mean, they're getting to know each other, and just in one season, they don't strike me as a team to actually get to like just combine into like a singular team that can potentially make a playoff run. That's just outrageous to say that.
But no, it's absolutely not outrageous to say that.
I have to take this. Look, I think people put a lot of blame on James Harden's back in the past because he's put up very good numbers. I think he's had decent teams around him. But look, if this Rockets team wants to be successful, it's got to be on him to be all in. Because a couple weeks ago, you remember what we were talking about? We were thinking about a team that was totally collapsed and totally tanking. We thought Russell Westbrook would leave. He did. We thought they might send him off for like draft picks. They sent him off for John Wall. We thought James Harden would leave. He was out of he had no intention of coming to practice. He had no sign of having any commitment to the Rockets organization. So he has to show that he's committed to playing with this team. Like he has to show he actually wants to be in. He's not just in there to like make his trade stock go up. That being said, I think it's a fair point that you made, but I think it's totally Philly. Look, they're playing very well. Although you would lose Ben Simmons, who's a key part of that team and holds them together, the combination of Joel Embiid and James Harden would be deadly. Not to mention that they would still have a lot of good pieces around them, like Seth Curry, maybe even other guys that they wouldn't have to trade. I think that is undoubtedly the best team that he has a chance with right now, especially because the Rockets still seem confused. They lost Daryl Morey. They lost their head coach. They still seem confused about Harden's commitment to that team. And I just think he would have a much better team and much better players around him in Philly, as well as a better coach and a better GM. Daryl Morey went there.
I wouldn't say no, not playoffs wise. We can't call Doc Rivers a great playoff coach because he's
a better coach than the Rockets have.
No, we haven't seen their current Rockets coach in the playoffs. That's why he hasn't been a head coach yet, and he's looked great while he has coached. I think you have to give him a chance. He's better than Mike D'Antoni was. Mike D'Antoni was focused on the stats. That's why it's great that he's not coached by Mike D'Antoni anymore, because Mike D'Antoni didn't give a living shit about winning, if you're going to be real honest here. If you're looking at the current rosters, if you're trading him for Ben Simmons, or if you're trading him for Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., if you're trading him to even Toronto for like Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet, those big packages take away so much from a team that until the free agency hits, that team won't be able to build a championship roster around James Harden, especially with the current teams they have. No team has a perfectly fit team for James Harden except for the possibility of the Nuggets or the Sixers, but they would be giving up big pieces in those trades anyways. But the next thing I want to talk about is Russell Westbrook, James Harden's old partner in crime, and that is Russell Westbrook the problem in Washington? Is the why they are losing?
I'll take this one because I think that if you look at it from the surface, Russell Westbrook is doing all he can. But if you actually dive deep into it, he's not playing at the level he should be at all. Russell Westbrook's averaging 20, 11, and 11, which is absolutely amazing. I'll give him that. That's absolutely amazing. But he's shooting 38% from the field. I mean, that's terrible. He's shooting 22% from three-pointers. I know the guy can't shoot threes, but I mean, come on. Like he has an efficiency rating of 15, an all-time low right now. I know that's 7 games in, but these things do matter. I mean, his 45% true shooting just shows you that this man is his shooting is just absolutely terrible. That's all-time low. He's a 17% turnover. That's an all-time high for him. Negative offensive and defensive box plus minus is negative 1.6. His value replacement rating is just 0.
Cut it with the stats. I myself have slandered Russell Westbrook in the past. I've been the biggest person on Russell Westbrook's behind his entire career, just talking about how he stat pads all the time. He can't help winning. I'd rather have anybody else. But is he the main reason they're losing right now? No, he's not the main reason they're losing right now. It's because they have Scott Brooks as their head coach. Scott Brooks is one of the worst coaches I've ever seen. I mean, in the worst possible times, he brings out the worst possible lineups to win games. You want to know why they lost to Chicago by 3? On their back-to-back, they actually lost to them back-to-back. But on their second one, you want to know why they lost to Chicago by 3? It wasn't because Russell Westbrook had a negative plus-minus or a high turnover rate. It's because Otto Porter scored 28. Their defense is terrible. Their defense is so incredibly terrible, and he is the one slightly bright spot of that defense. I get he's struggling on offense, but he is the highest defensive rating on that team. It's 112, and they are 25th in defensive rating. This team, Thomas Bryant is their main defensive anchor in the post. That's not going to win you basketball games, especially when you go up against a team that has any sort of a center. They have a terrible coaching situation. They have terrible defense. And even me, the biggest critic of Russell Westbrook, says that this has nothing to do with his struggles so far.
But it's clear Russell Westbrook has to be more efficient. I feel like he's had that problem for most of his career. He's a very ball dominant guy, and he just has to be more efficient. Otherwise, he's never going to win on a team. He's never going to win a championship unless he's going to be more efficient in the league. That's clear. But he does not have the assets around him or the coaching to put the blame on him right now. He's doing all that he can. Again, what Ben said, for everyone saying stat padding, right now he's putting up almost 12 assists, almost 11 rebounds, 21 points. That is incredibly impressive stats, along with Bradley Beal, who they're working pretty well as a duo so far, but it's about their defense. You can't put that all on him, and just their defense is just pretty horrific right now. They gave up 140 something points the other night. Like, it's really bad right now. They have to come together as a team.
Yeah,
It's
and yeah, and having your defensive backcourt, especially with when Rui Hachimura was out, you're having Davis Bertans and Thomas Bryant running the post defensively. And then, I mean, Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook, they're suitable defenders. They're pretty decent defenders. But anybody is scoring on this team. I think they let Philly score 141 points on them. And Philly, coming into this year, was thought of as an offensive liability. Of course, that's no longer the case. They brought in shooters. But letting any team score 141 points and losing when your best player scores 60 is not the fault of Russell Westbrook. It is that your defense and your coach is terrible. Scott Brooks sat Bradley Beal, Arjun. He sat Bradley Beal for a majority of the fourth quarter when he had 57 going into the fourth quarter. He finished with 60. Russ, I think he would probably get a little breather, but you're sitting him for majority of the fourth quarter. He finished with 60, could have won them that game if he had any sense of what a good rotation is. This has no blame to do on Russell Westbrook. Of course, he needs to be better, and I take that back. There is little blame on him, but the reason that they're 2-6 isn't that Russell Westbrook isn't as efficient as he should be. It's that this team has no defense or no coaching.
I mean, that's a fair point, but Ben, there's a certain. I agree that I think Scott Brooks is the biggest problem for this team, but Russell Westbrook needs to be taken accountable. I mean, look at the way he's playing right now. His shooting numbers are absolutely terrible. I mean, if he played like he played in his rookie year, maybe they could be winning. They wouldn't have been 0-5 at some point. I mean, you were telling me some other podcast episode that this was one of the best bench scoring, the best benches in terms of scoring in the league. You were telling me that one of the earlier episodes, and I mean, what's going on with them? They're not playing well at all.
I never said that. I never said they would have a great.
No, yeah, you did say that. I mean,
I said they have a decent bench. They have a decent bench. Don't get me wrong. They have no defense, though. That's the problem with this team. And they have a top 5, top 10 backcourt in the NBA, and Russell Westbrook isn't performing as he should. But none of the blame goes on him because he's not efficient as he should be. Efficiency for him is just a step down. He's not the one causing the loss. He's not actively going down the floor and shooting every time. He's actually second on the team in usage. He's not even bringing up the floor the entire time.
That doesn't matter. You can give me usage. You can give me usage rates. I don't care. You can't be shooting with you can't have a 45% true shooting right now. You can't have a 17% turnover percent. I mean, that's just absolutely terrible.
That's terrible. But if you sit down and you watch basketball, you watch a Wizards basketball game, and you watch Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook carry this team defensively on their backs, and tell me again that when Otto Porter scores 30 points on 71% shooting, that Russell Westbrook shooting not as good as he should be, or getting 3 or 4 turnovers in a game is the reason they're losing, then you need to rewatch the basketball game, because that's just not what's happening.
First of all, I don't want to say that Russell Westbrook is the main reason they're losing, because I agree their defense is lackluster. And I mean, their coaching situation is absolutely terrible. I agree with you guys on both of that. But you also, like I've said, you have to hold that man accountable. He needs to be more efficient. And Russell Westbrook has been efficient. He had an efficiency peak last year. He was extremely efficient during his MVP season. So I would say that there's if he shot better, if he made better choices during the game, they could have had a better chance to win those games. Maybe not. I mean, maybe not all the games, because obviously there's Scott Brooks in the defense and their lackluster defense. But my point is that he needs to play better for them on the offensive end.
Right now, even though they have a very talented team, teams like the Hawks and the Hornets not only look way better right now, but it seems pretty likely that they're going to make the playoffs over the Wizards. They just don't seem like they're just horrible on defense. They're not a very coherent team. They have tons of talent. We saw that with Bradley Beal. But if you can put up 60 points and you're still losing the game, and you have Russell Westbrook by your side, and also a lot of good players, Denny Avdia looks pretty good, and they also have other good players. They're not going to compete against teams like the Hornets and the Hawks, who just look way better.
Yeah, and I mean, and they're in an awkward coaching situation where, of course, you would think it's ideal to fire their head coach, but I mean, Russell Westbrook loves him, and they just got into the season, so they obviously won't fire him, because I mean, there's so many things that keep the management from firing him, especially this early in the season, which will be bad for the Wizards. But maybe they let it go and tank. But the next thing I do want to talk about, the last thing we will talk about in the NBA for today, is which team is under more pressure to win it all this year, the Nets or the Bucks?
All right, let me take this. It is undoubtedly the Nets, 100%, no question. So to turn to Milwaukee first, Giannis and Milwaukee does have pressure on them because he just signed a big deal, right? And he's got players around him. They've trusted him to win a championship, even though I don't think he's going to win a championship. People put the Bucks up there every single year, and I just don't think they're ready. But in terms of the pressure, it's 100% the Nets. Even though this is the first this is the first year that this team has been assembled, with the way the Nets are playing right now, showing how dominant they are with that duo of KD and Kyrie and an incredible bench, and they've got pieces around them to contribute to a winning team. They have way more pressure. They went all in on KD and Kyrie, right? They went in on their stars. I'm pretty sure they just paid Joe Harris a lot of money. They paid Kyrie and KD a lot of money. They have gone all in on those guys. These are their last options. So they are entrusting them to win a championship. They have all the pressure on them to make that duo work, to make the whole team work along with those guys. And they've looked like they can do it so far, but they have way more pressure than Milwaukee, seeing as Milwaukee is just not as top heavy. They haven't gone all in as much as the Nets have on the current team right now.
Well, honestly, that's the thing. When you say all in, they did go on with Giannis. I mean, they went all in with trying to secure Bogdanovich, and guess what? They were investigated for it. That's the definition of doing whatever it takes. I mean, they gave up so many picks to get Drew Holiday. It was a very unfair trade, but you know what? They went all in to secure Giannis's happiness. So I would say that the Bucks have more pressure on them, because I get the fact that you're saying that they've had that pressure the entire time, but I mean, last year they were the best team in the NBA in terms of wins. I mean, they have that pressure that's put on them is to perform in the playoffs. Giannis has underperformed in the playoffs in the past. I mean, the pressure on him to perform in the playoffs, the pressure on the Bucks as a team to actually perform in the playoffs is a lot higher than the Nets.
No.
The Nets haven't even started yet. This is their first year.
The pressure to win a title this year. The pressure to win a title this year is not at all on the Bucks. The Bucks.
Okay, let me rephrase that. The pressure.
No. You said what you said. You said what you said, and I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. Because you said that the Nets don't have as much pressure to win a title this year as the Bucks, and that's completely untrue. You look at not only for chemistry reasons, as a lot of people like to bring up. You look at everything about the roster. You look at the fact that KD is 32 years old, coming off an Achilles injury. You look at the fact that Kyrie Irving is 28, and he said he wants to retire in his early 30s. This team doesn't have a lot of time. They have a clear timestamp on them, and of course, when you look at the chemistry issues, this team could split up very quick if anything goes wrong with the team. You look at the Bucks. Giannis is 26. He hasn't even hit his prime yet. He has multiple free agencies where he will be under contract to get players to come to Milwaukee because he's that great of a player. He's coming off 2 straight MVPs and 1 Defensive Player of the Year last year. He's won Most Improved 2 years in his career. He doesn't have the pressure. He, of course, has pressure to win the title because he has in his past. Maybe his legacy, his independent legacy, has the pressure to win this title this year. Yes, I agree with that. But the Bucks, in a total, no. They already signed Giannis to a 5-year extension. There's no pressure because if they lose this year in the first round, Giannis already wants to live up. He wants to live up to his contract. He doesn't want to leave. So if he's just signed that extension, you don't have pressure to win a title right now. You have a pressure to win a title when Giannis is there, or else you're wasting his talent. But right now, the team with 2 generational superstars nearing the end of their primes in their careers, you absolutely have the most pressure of anybody in the league to win a championship.
First of all, that's outrageous to say that KD is going to have he's nearing it, because he is getting older. But you lose athleticism as you get older, and he's not relying on athleticism. He's an absolute straight up scorer. And if you look at the Nets, you can't guarantee chemistry issues. I mean, the chemistry issues that Kyrie had with the Celtics was that team without Kyrie had made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. How they even made it to the finals, but they lost against LeBron. This team knew that they could make it. They could be. Terry Rozier knew that he could be the starting point guard, and when Kyrie came in, he knew that he wanted to get stats. I mean, he wanted to be the center. That didn't fit right. That's not the same situation as the Nets right now. The Nets are a ticking time bomb.
No, the Nets.
The problem is that the Bucks. You say that he signed an extension. Giannis
He
made
did.
it so clear. He made it so clear that he wants to. I mean, he doesn't care about MVP. He doesn't care about winning more MVP. He said it multiple times that he wants to win a champ. That he wants to win a
That
championship.
doesn't put pressure on him to win it this year. He signed a 5-year extension. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That means he's going to be there for.
It doesn't matter.
He can't
still
force out of there.
clear that he wants to win, and he doesn't care about MVP.
And he signed a 5-year extension, knowing he can win in there. He has 5 years on his contract, compared to a team that signed. I think they have now 2 more years on their contract after this year. In the Nets, with 2 generational superstars, and Father Time always wins. It always wins. No player besides LeBron is ever just not aged.
Listen to me, okay? I have to step in because Arjun, you just proved our point. What happened in Cleveland? He left for Boston. What happened in Boston? They said that he broke that up. Even last year, they were talking about chemistry issues. That is one of the reasons the pressure's on. The pressure's on to prove that Kyrie is not like a cancer in the locker room or whatever else people will call him. Both of those guys like to run their mouth on social media, KD and Kyrie. They had a team last year that was pretty good, but they weren't able to get it done. Look, at the end of the day, they have pushed all their pieces in on these guys. Both of them have their own issues. Kyrie in the locker room, KD coming off of the Achilles injury. Can they work together? Can they work with the guys that were coming before? They've gone all in. Both of those guys have been known to leave their teams when they're unhappy very quickly. KD going to Golden State. Kyrie going from Cleveland to the Celtics, then to the Nets. They have
Isaac.
to prove. The Bucks have more, even though the pressure is on Giannis to perform in the playoffs, because he has not performed in the playoffs yet.
Mm-hmm.
The clock for the Nets to be successful is far shorter than the clock for the Bucks.
Absolutely.
Isaac, the problem is that I didn't mean to use those examples in your favor, because I meant to use those as an example that the Nets situation right now is not similar to the Cavs, and the Cavs have one of the greatest players of all time. They had LeBron. He knew Kyrie was not in the peak of his career then. He was still young. He knew that he would have to leave the Cavs to branch out. He was to really reach his prime, and he did in Boston. And then in Boston, there was a completely different situation where the young talent really took over. That is completely different to what's going on in the Nets. And so far, KD's looking amazing.
It wasn't that the team. It wasn't that the talent took over. It's that the team fucking hated him.
He hasn't shown any evidence of any locker room cancer.
Yes, he has.
He's looking like he has good relationships with those guys.
Arjun, he absolutely has shown signs of being a locker room cancer. It
wasn't.
Arjun, you finished talking. Now let me talk. You saw him in Boston. It wasn't the young talent taking over. It was that the young talent fucking hated him. That's why he left, because they didn't want him there. At the start of the season, he said he was going to sign a contract extension, and then at the end of the year, nobody wanted him there. Boston fans, Boston players, Boston coaches, nobody wanted him in Boston because of what he did in the locker room. Of course, he's one of the most talented players of all time, and that's why the Nets have the most pressure, but he's a locker room cancer. There's clear signs of that. He's a great guy, but when it comes to winning and being in that locker room, it wasn't that the young talent took over. It was that the young talent didn't like him. But
also, I have to add one more thing. Both of those guys were in situations where they're good friends, right? We saw this with Russell Westbrook and James Harden. They were both good friends. They wanted to be put together. If you are giving your players enough power to say, hey, I want to play with him, put me with him, they have to be able to deliver results. The Nets, in every sense of the phrase, have gone all in on them, and they do not have nearly as much time as the Bucks do to be successful and win a championship. It's as simple as that. They have much more pressure on them.
Isaac, the thing is that you're talking about all in, but besides those two, I'll say one more thing, and you back up. But look, there are two guys. Those two guys, if you take them away from the Nets team, the Nets are still a playoff team. They still have a good. It's not like they've invested fully into those two players, even though they have invested, but they're not like completely hinged on those two players. They have a great team besides them.
But the next thing we do want to talk about is going to the NFL and talking about the Jets. They fell from 1 to 2, so they don't have the rights to Trevor Lawrence anymore. I think that's obviously going to the Jaguars. But the question has been asked, should the Jets consider drafting Penei Sewell tell me if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, with the second pick in the draft instead of a quarterback. Personally, I think this would actually be, I'm not saying lock it in, you have to do this, because of course, if you pick Justin Fields and you sign offensive linemen around him and you get him a competent team around him, then yes, Justin Fields is the great pick. He has probably a touch more potential than Darnold does because of the dual threat quarterback he is. We saw it in that championship game. We saw it all season. But Sam Darnold, we're not going to sit here and act like he's some terrible quarterback, like he played so terrible on a great team like Ben Roethlisberger did on the Steelers this year. He played bad. Like, he didn't play impressive football, but he was on a terrible, terrible team with no O-line protection and the worst head coach in NFL history, in my opinion, besides Bill O'Brien. You look at the Jets, if you give Sam Darnold another chance, Penei Sewell, he has the chance to be a Hall of Fame type offensive lineman. That's really valuable, and that's just as valuable as a quarterback to me when you have a guy who has that type of potential at the offensive lineman position, especially since they drafted Mekhi Becton last year at the offensive line position. If you build up this offensive line, say you have, I think, the most cap space of any NFL team this offseason, get him a couple receivers that anybody has ever seen catch a ball in their life. Get him a defense that's somewhat competent, and hire a coach. Like, they interviewed the Chiefs offensive coordinator to be their head coach if they can get that off, and then keep Darnold, give him another chance, because there will be other quarterbacks in other drafts if you're terrible again. But you have to give Darnold another chance, not just 2 years with a terrible, terrible team and a terrible, terrible coach.
Okay, look.
Okay, so actually, Isaac, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think you can make this issue complicated, but I think in football, the center of your team is always your quarterback. And it's just that simple. And when you're a bad team trying to elevate, trying to build around players, I think you honestly drafting a quarterback until you find the one that you're ready to put your franchise around is not a bad plan. They can go in on Justin Fields, which is he looked incredible. He's looked incredible so far. And I think that's just the best chance for them right now. When you're going halfway in a quarterback and you're saying, oh, like Sam Darnold's stats, I don't know if I'm looking at this wrong, but it looks like he had 9 touchdowns and 11 interceptions on this year. That is horrible. Those are horrible stats. Now you can say, oh, he had a bad team. Put some guys around him and he's good. But you don't know that. It's more definite to be able to insert a quarterback who has proven himself, even though it's college, has proven himself that he is a very incredible quarterback, that you can say, oh, I can have trust in them now. Instead of running with a hypothetical for Sam Darnold, who has shown maybe he can be okay, but he's played horrible this last year. It's better to go in, because you really have to go in all in on the quarterback situation. You can't really go halfway.
Yeah, no, but the problem is we haven't seen Sam Darnold play quarterback on a competent team. Like, you could see be like, oh, the Deshaun Watson had the most passing yards and he was on a terrible team, but of course he's a top 3 quarterback arguably in the league. You look at people, there's these quarterbacks where Sam Darnold, he still has potential. Like, he's not a 5th-year quarterback. He's not worthy of giving up on yet, especially with, arguably the worst coach of all time in that bad of an offense. And yeah, Justin Fields can be great, but he also has flaws in his game. You don't know how good he's going to be in the NFL. Ohio State has produced terrible, terrible NFL quarterbacks as of recently. I mean, when you look at it, of course, Justin Fields or if Trevor Lawrence falls, those 2 guys are great picks. If you pick them, that's a great pick. But no quarterback can truly live up to their true potential when their team is like the current Jets. You can't live up to your full potential when you're playing on the New York Jets that he had last year and the year before. These teams have been terrible. So I'm not saying it's a lock. I'm saying either way you go, a good direction. You could trade Darnold for a decent piece or 2. But when you're looking at Penei Sewell, if you draft him and then you use your cap space this offseason to build a competent roster, that team could compete for not anything serious, but that team,
with how he performed last year, Justin Fields isn't a quarterback I would want to pass up on. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and Isaac, I'm gonna get my argument, because I think that, Ben, you brought the 5-year thing, that he hasn't played 5 years, but usually by year 3, you can usually tell if the quarterback is going to be like significant. And you have a good argument with the Jets thing. But I mean, if you look at it, he's had a 57 completion percentage in 2018, 62 in 2019, and 60 in 2020. I get that he doesn't have receivers, but he usually shows some progression. And he just hasn't shown the progression that would make me really reconsider drafting an O-line for like an offensive line over a quarterback like Justin Fields. Like I think that the offensive line is the most important part of an offense. But if you're talking about individually, an offensive line versus a guy who like Justin Fields, who's been right behind Trevor Lawrence his entire career. He's had 3 interceptions last year with 51 touchdowns, 5,000 yards. I mean, this guy has really shown a lot of potential. And I think he can be a great quarterback. I'm not saying he will, but I think he can be. And you can't tell me that one offensive lineman is more impactful than a future franchise quarterback.
If you can, drafting an offensive lineman that has that Hall of Fame potential is a lot safer of a bet than a quarterback who has Hall of Fame potential. A, injury, B, all of the risk, as we've seen in past quarterbacks that have been touted out to be franchise quarterbacks that have been drafted. Like, you could look at Josh Rosen, you could look at Dwayne Haskins, you could look at these guys who were supposed to be great quarterbacks who have been so or so bad, honestly. Like, Dwayne Haskins just got cut. And I think either way, again, like, there's no bad pick unless you draft a guy who's supposed to go. Unless you draft like Devontae Smith, unless you draft like a receiver in the top 3, unless you draft a guy that's and that's not Penei Sewell, Trevor Lawrence, or Justin Fields, you're gonna have a good draft. That's just all I'm saying.
It's like a bet worth taking because you're underestimating the ability of Justin Fields because this guy, like I said, he has been right behind Trevor Lawrence. It's not like he's not like I don't see as much like a bust material from him as much as like maybe other quarterbacks. Like he's been a great quarterback. But if you just look at the immediate impact that he'll have over an offensive lineman, I mean, if you want to look at the impact that an offensive lineman has, you need to bring other good offensive linemen around to have an actual good, balanced line.
Justin Fields won't be able to have a good impact without an offensive line. That's the difference. Any other look at either you get Darnold, you get somebody in the free agency, or in the future drafts, you get a good quarterback. Then you can, with a great offensive line, they can be a great quarterback if they're average. We've seen that in the past. Like if you don't have a good offensive line, you're not going to succeed. So draft
Justin Fields, Ben. He can scramble. He doesn't need. I mean, he can scramble.
A lot of quarterbacks can scramble. We don't know what Justin Fields will be, and he's probably a safe bet. We know that. But the possibility of drafting an offensive lineman that could be a Hall of Famer one day, one of those guys that has that extreme impact on the line, keep on building up the line and give Darnold a chance since he's still young and still has had a terrible situation every other year's career, I don't consider that a bad bet. But the next thing I want to talk about is Cam Newton still worthy of a starting position? Me, myself, as a Panther fan my entire life, I can't say he's worthy of being on an NFL roster. I can say that to say the least. He's worthy of being a backup, but is he a starting quarterback? No. He clearly doesn't have the arm that he used to a couple years ago. That shoulder has completely stopped his arm. This was his last chance to prove himself to be a starting quarterback, and he couldn't. I get it. He didn't have great weapons, but it wasn't like he was on the Jets or anything. Like he clearly, if you watch him play, if you watch the film, if you watch what he's doing, and you look at the stat book, he can't throw like he used to. He's really not reliable throwing the football. He's a great running quarterback. Again, that's great for a backup. If you wanted a guy that you needed a 4th and 1 and your running back isn't great, then yeah, get Cam Newton. He could be your backup. He's a great backup, but I don't think he's worthy of a starting position anymore.
I mean, all right. I think that Cam Newton, the idea that, I mean, you look at the receivers that he had. Of course, he had terrible receivers. Julian Edelman was injured. But he still had a 65 completion percentage. It's not like he can't throw the ball anymore.
No, but he wasn't throwing downfield.
But he can't. But he's still a passer, and he still had 2,600 yards. He had 592 rushing yards this year. He had 12 touchdowns. I mean, if you look at his rushing ability, that is starting caliber rushing ability. You can't tell me that there are quarterbacks in the league that really will perform better than Cam Newton right now. If you look at say the Washington football team situation right now, they could use Cam Newton. I mean, he's an upgrade.
No, he's an upgrade from Kyle Allen, but Kyle Allen's not a starting quarterback either. Alex Smith's not a starting caliber quarterback either.
Then that's the point. There are teams that don't have starting caliber quarterbacks, which means that Cam Newton can turn into a starting caliber quarterback. I mean, it's not like he's better than Kyle Allen. He's better than Alex Smith, but he clearly shows that he can still run the ball extremely efficiently. And like I said, he's not interception heavy.
For the
Isaac, go ahead.
I think for the Patriots, you have to roll the dice on him one more year. It's not fair to throw him out after this year. Try to put some pieces around him. You have to roll the dice on him, especially for Belichick and his, his career. The implications of throwing him out after 1 year, it looks pretty bad for the organization and for Belichick. You got to roll the dice with him one more year because his talent is not all gone. It seems like he's certainly out of his prime, but the talent is not all gone. I think you have to roll the dice with him. If the Patriots don't, another team will. I don't think everyone is just going to step aside from Cam Newton, even though that's happened in the past. I think as the Patriots right now, roll the dice with him, even to just have him had a better season so you can trade him for a better quarterback or other players. He is not suddenly someone who doesn't deserve a starting spot in the NFL right now.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't think coming into the year, he had the chance to prove himself, but he proved he's not a starting caliber quarterback. He has great rushing numbers. He's the one rushing quarterback who truly puts his body on the line, and I applaud him for that. And he did that in Carolina, but that's the reason his career didn't last as long in his prime, because he just wants to run into people. And that's a great and a bad thing for him and for the people watching. But Cam Newton, he can't throw anymore like a great quarterback. Like he can't throw a 20-yard pass. He can't throw a 15-yard pass accurately. We've seen it. He underthrows every player when he tries to throw 20 yards plus. And I think that I would rather if I'm the Bears, I'm not going out to sign Cam Newton to start him over Mitch Trubisky. I'm not doing that. Mitch Trubisky's still young and he can throw the football decently. I think he's very underrated due to the memes, but generally, I don't think he's worthy of a starting position. I think he would be a great backup, and maybe he proves himself to be a starter on an organization. I hope he does. I love Cam Newton. He was a great player in Carolina, and he's a great guy. But the next thing I do want to talk about, and it's the last thing we will talk about today, is what is the ceiling for the Steelers in this year's playoff?
I'll take this one, Ben. I'll take this one. Look, the Steelers maybe looked promising at the beginning of the year, but I think we have seen truly how their performance is going to reflect in the playoffs lately. They have not played well. I think they're 4 for 5 in their last couple games, something of that sort. Maybe they're playing a little bit better. But after 11 games won in a row, they have played pretty horribly lately. And I can't imagine that they are making it to the conference championship right now. Their ceiling right now is a second round. If they're lucky enough to beat the Browns, which is totally not a guarantee. I think the Browns can totally beat them right now. They haven't lived up to the expectation that the beginning of the season has led us to believe. They looked like they would be one of the top teams in the NFL right now. They have sunk far below, and I think they're starting to show their true colors as a football team. They're not going to do well in the playoffs. I think best case scenario, they make it to the second round, but they're not getting farther than that.
Yeah, and I mean, Arjun, you right there on this Zoom screen I'm looking at, you, Jack Spencer, everyone who I've talked about with the Steelers has clowned me when they were 11-0, when I said their schedule was pretty terrible. Like, their schedule was just so and them beating those teams wasn't impressive to me. I said they weren't going to be a competitive team in the playoffs to win anything serious, winning a Super Bowl, going to the AFC Championship. They weren't going to go there. I never thought this was going to be, and I think they didn't end on a losing streak, but they had a decent losing streak there. They're now, 11-4 or 12-4 at the end of the season. I'm not putting losing to the Browns past them. The Browns have a terrible pass defense, a great run defense, and most importantly, it's off the stat books, it's off the talent. It's just the heart of being in the playoffs after 20 years of not being there, finally getting there. I think Odell Beckham, I think Nick Chubb is one of the best pure runners in the league, backed up by Kareem Hunt, and that decent receiving core. That team is going to fight harder than any team will in the playoffs, besides maybe the football team, because they just made it to the playoffs for the first time in 20 years in franchise history. This is a moment that they will not have guaranteed for the future, and they want to live up. They're playing the Steelers, who have been hyped up and also hated by just about everybody in the league. I think everybody on that defense wants to hit them, quite frankly, if that's fair to say. I think most defenses in the NFL want to hit Juju Smith-Schuster right now. I think people are dancing on their logos. But when it comes down to it, I think I can't have them losing to the Browns, but I would say their ceiling is probably the second round. I can't see them going to the AFC Championship. I still haven't checked the playoff bracket to see if they're playing the Bills or the Chiefs in the second round, but they're
not a team right now.
They're not a competent playoff team.
No, guys, I think that the Steelers really were overrated. Ben, you were right about that. They are overrated. I knew that they were overrated, but I feel like at the time, I feel like they were overhated at the same time too, because they're still such an elite defense. Now, the problem is that you guys really never mentioned once about their injury struggles. I mean, when there was a point in time where TJ Watt, who in my opinion should be the defensive player of the year, no doubt about it, who was not going on a tear this season, was the only defender they really had. I mean, Bud Dupree was out. Cameron Hayward was injured. Cameron Hayward has kind of come back for the playoffs. And remember, this Browns team, they still have a young Baker Mayfield. I mean, in general, veterans perform better in the playoffs than than not rookies, but younger players. And I'm not saying that Baker Mayfield won't play well, but it's also a thing where when you're getting all your defense back, your defensive line is now going to be complete. Joe Hayden had COVID. He's going to come back. When this team is complete, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, I guarantee you, will have trouble. So I think that this team's ceiling, I know this is not going to happen most likely, but I think maybe, they can, their offense looked good the other day. They can make it to the AFC Championship game. Maybe they can beat the Bills if their defense has an absolutely insane game. And their defense has been really good. They just had injuries, and now they're fully healthy.
That's obviously a possibility. And of course, if you want to look at it at a literal standpoint, which is the most boring standpoint to look at it, any team could win the Super Bowl, and of course that's boring. It's like saying the Knicks could win the championship this year.
No, but it's like it's at a point where like their defense
I'm not talking about you.
Down that Diggs and Allen.
But they could definitely beat the Bills. That's a possibility. But there's no way if I'm at a table and I have to bet on it, I'm not betting on the Steelers to get anywhere past the second round. But that will be it for us today. If you're still watching and you haven't liked and you haven't subscribed, what are you doing? Come on, man. That's lazy talk. Go ahead, tilt your phone over. If you're on the computer, just scroll down, like the video, subscribe, maybe turn on that notification bell so every time a podcast is up, you will get the notification and you can watch it immediately.
That on Spotify too.
Yeah,
but if you guys are still watching, we love you. We still love you guys.
Yeah. But that'll be it for us today, and we'll see you guys later.